Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we'll be talking about how governors function under our constitution. If you look at the history of governors, you will find that in 1858, the Crown directly appointed governors as agents of the Crown. Well, that phase continued for a long, long time till we came to the 1935 Act, when the governors functioned under a certain scheme of things which is part of the 1935 Act. But when we became independent, and the functioning of the office of the governor was controlled by the provisions of the Constitution. This phase continued, and governors, by and large, since India became a republic from 1950, functioned within those constraints. But then came the phase of 2014 onwards, when I believe, and this is my opinion, people may not agree with it, that the old rule of the center directly asking the governor to do this and that, in my opinion, today governors are in fact the agents of the union government sitting here. So we want to discuss a lot of these things, how governments has functioned over the years since 2014. Has the constitution and the concept of the federal structure of this country, has that been damaged in some sense? And we have three extraordinary people with us today, people who are well versed in the law, people who have actually functioned as governors, and people who have actually exposed governors in what they are doing in the state. So we have, first of all, N.N. Vohra ji. Thank you very much. And let me tell you something about N.N. Vohra ji. He's the quintessential old guard bureaucrat. He knows what the state is all about. He belongs to the Punjab cadre, the IAS, and he functioned there as Home Secretary. After Blue Star, he was functioning as Home Secretary in Punjab. He came to the center. In the center, he was first Secretary Defense Production, then he became Defense Secretary, then he became Home Secretary, and he retired sometimes in 1993, I think. And so 1994 to 97, he was in limbo, and then suddenly Gujral Sahab asked him to be an interlocutor. He became an interlocutor in Kashmir, and his services were wanted by every government that came, including Vajpayeeji's government. And then, of course, ultimately he became the governor of Kashmir. So he knows exactly how governors are to function. And so thank you very much, sir, for being here. We have Madan Lokur. Now, Madan has been an old friend. He's been a judge of the Supreme Court. He's been a Chief Justice of the Gauhati High Court. He's been Chief Justice of Andhra Pradesh. He is committed to social causes and to the cause of liberty. He's my alma mater, St. Stephen's. We both belong to the same college. He's also the sitting judge of the Supreme Court in Fiji. And he's well versed in the functions of the governor under our constitution, because he was one of the judges who rendered that judgment in a constitution bench on what happened in Arunachal Pradesh. Yes. So, and there they discussed the discretionary powers of the governor. We have Mr. P. Thiagarajan, one of the most articulate legislators in this country, and we've watched him with great interest on his articulations from time to time, especially in the context in which governors are functioning in the state. He is a technologist. He got his PhD from the New York State University. His grandfather was the chief minister of Madras Presidency and a minister in the government then. His father was a minister in the government. He is a minister in the government. And so he knows Dravidian politics. He knows how the governor is functioning in that state. So we'll talk about all these things. Thank you, Madan. Thank you, Mr. Thiagarajan, for being here. So let me start with you, Vohra Sahab. Don't you find a difference in when you were governor and how governors are functioning today?
Well, that's not a very good question, in the sense that with the passage of time, different people have been appointed governors of different states. If you're particularly referring to Kashmir, or are you talking generally?
I'm talking about governors in general.
Well, governors in general, to the extent that I can speak about confidently. When I joined service, and much later when I was dealing with matters which involved the role of the governor, in those days, the Raj Bhavan or the government house, as we used to call it, were occupied by persons who were not associated with politics, the large majority of them. Maybe perhaps once in a while we had somebody who had some background in politics, but was not a practicing politician when he was appointed governor.
Yeah.
But over the period of time, we see especially with the single party rule at the center and the states led to new formations, coalition governments.
Yes.
Then we saw the evolution, the beginning of a confrontationist relationship between the union and the states. And at about that time, if I am correct in my memory, the kind of persons who were nominated, appointed as governors were particularly chosen for their political orientation or their reliability to carry out the behest of the center.
Yes.
And execute certain approaches or policies in the state to which they were appointed. So that led to, if I may use the word, politicization of the role of the governor,
Yes.
appointment of the governor, selection of the governor. When I was appointed governor in the UPA time, there was a good sprinkling of former persons belonging to the judiciary, to the police, civil services, armed forces. There were one or two academics. But looking back, since my time, now 15, 16 years have passed, I find that over 90% persons who are appointed working as governors are people with political background, with strong political convictions and no awkwardness in expressing them on a daily basis.
But the problem is, recently there was a governors' conference, as you know, in 2024, recently, July sometime, or in fact later. And there the government, in fact, encouraged governors not to be passive spectators. And the governors made public statements to the effect, we're not going to be passive spectators. Now, that's why I posed the question earlier. The role of the governor seems to have changed from being...
Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
From being functioning within the framework of the Constitution and now functioning outside that framework by being agents of the government. That's why I posed that question.
Now, I don't think there is too much time to be wasted in terms of what the Constitution says. Because if the mandate of the person in the Raj Bhavan is a straightforward 1, 2, 3, the Constitution doesn't come in that.
Well, that's the worrying part. What do you say?
Yes, you see, I think, we have to recognize constitutional morality, right? The Constitution expects constitutional authorities, including governors, of course,
Yes.
to act in a manner that is constitutional.
Yes.
All right. So if you are passive or active, it doesn't matter,
Right.
as long as you are within the Constitution.
Correct.
So I think constitutional morality still plays a very important role, and Dr. Ambedkar had emphasized that. So, but what's happening is that the functions of the governor now are becoming dysfunctional, so to speak. All right. So they're going beyond the constitutional limits. They're crossing the red line, so to speak, or the Lakshman Rekha, and that is worrying, because that is not in accordance with constitutional morality. That is not in accordance with the federal structure that has been given to us.
Our present Vice President, Dhankar Sahab, when he was recently he made a statement saying that I'm not a member of the RSS, but it's my misfortune that I am not. You see? And it's perhaps the most nationalist organization in the world, and I would love to be a member of the RSS. Now, when a governor makes such a statement, when the Vice President of India, he's the Vice President of India, what message does it send to constitutional authorities around the country?
Yeah, I think it's a very depressing message, but I'll actually go one step even further. I'd say that what we are seeing now in terms of the way governors act is a reversion to the era of the British Crown or even earlier the East India Company. They were intended to be agents of the regime in whatever that regime was, whether it was the Crown or a corporate entity, and intended to ensure that things didn't happen outside of the regime's interest. And that's basically what we're seeing now. And the role has become not just activist. I mean, I don't have to go very far. At least you're talking about people who talk about their personal preferences or their personal issues. We have a governor who regularly tries to teach us our own culture. He comes and tells us what the Tamil people ought to be doing and what the Tirukkural actually says.
But
and
you
runs
should be liberal enough to absorb that.
No, what I'm saying it's his interpretation, which, if I may say, is spectacularly unread. So it's not, I'm happy to take inputs from anybody who has some depth, but telling Tamil people about Tamil culture and Tamil norms and history is a bit, I think, excessive for somebody who's not got really the background or the capability. So now I think they have become agents of whatever the regime is. And they are actively competing with each other to show who's more loyal than the king. And so there's an unhealthy kind of competition between governors. And this line between politics and governors is completely erased. We have the classic example from my state. Many of the people who stood for election unsuccessfully became governors. Governor of Telangana was a politician, was elevated to governorship, resigned the governorship, and came and stood for election again and lost. So this line is completely blurred in the current circumstances.
You look back to the history, sir, of the institution of the governor, and you mentioned Ambedkar and the debates in the Constituent Assembly. One of the debates was, should a governor be elected or nominated? One of the central parts of that discussion. And Ambedkar said the following. He said, if the Constitution remains in principle the same as we intend that it should be, that the governor should be a purely constitutional governor with not the power of interference in the administration of the province, then it seems to me quite immaterial whether he is nominated or elected, right? And as you said, sir, that the Sarkaria Commission itself says that governors should not be political appointees. They should be men of eminence and of substance. So actually, we've thrown that moral concept out into the dustbin, right? And we are left with these people, each of whom has a political agenda. You have a governor saying, I will not administer oath of office to you.
Yes.
You have a governor who sanctions prosecution, right, by holding an inquiry himself. Recently in Karnataka.
You had a governor who has sacked a minister.
Who sacked a minister. You have
governors who refuse to sign bills passed by the legislature, sometimes unanimously passed by the legislature.
Yes.
So why is it, sir, that the nation is not talking about how this federal structure is being demolished and how we are now moving away from the very concept and the basis of our Constitution? Why is nobody talking about it? And what do you think should be done?
One of my concerns for many years, particularly it arises from the fact that I've served in the national security management arena for many years. If we look at the role of governors, even from the very limited perspective of center-state understandings in the theatre in the arena of national security, then I dare say that the governor can play a very important role as a bridge between the union and the state in motivating and persuading and contriving understandings which would lend to national security management on a surer footing. Right now, I find that on very serious matters relating to national security, politics enters into. Some years ago, several years ago, our Prime Minister visited the border state of Firozpur. And you would recall that
Yes.
the total failure of security.
Yes, yes.
Now, I look back on the time I served the same state. Whoever was the Prime Minister or Home Minister or any important person coming to a state, it was a bounden duty to ensure security.
Yes.
Not because a person belonged to this or that ideology, it was duty, responsibility. Now I find that even in terms of national security concerns, politics has entered the system. Our police, our enforcement agencies, and they are now colored ideologies, and therefore their constitutional duties, which they are bound to perform and discharge, they are suffering, they are compromised, they are eroded. So there's a great threat to, we are a large country with 145 crores, spread from north to south, east to west, large diversities in our culture, in our languages, in our habits. So you need certain essential, fundamental, unifying forces to keep the country together.
Yes.
So I would say that if you do not utilize the gadgetry of the Constitution in moving in that direction, then one is working towards more difficult times.
So because you, as you said rightly, the governor should be a bridge between the state and the center, bridge in the sense that wherever there needs to be a dialogue, the governor should help in that
should
dialogue
promote that.
and promote that.
Because as Judge Saab would agree that essentially governors have no particular role. This question of discretion, in my opinion, or choice or discretion is zero. If you take decisions which are called in your discretion, which are based on rationality, on good foundation, objectivity, then there is no discretion. So in sum, a governor really has no independent authority at all. You summon assembly, you adjourn an assembly, you address the assembly and so on. And these are ritualistic. But the more important thing is a reasonably fair and deep understanding of the problems of the state, of the people of the state, communicating those sensitive concerns to the union.
Correct.
And then conveying what the union's responses are to the state leadership, all without publicity. But today I find in the last many years now, too many public statements made by sitting governors on issues relating to the conduct of the chief minister or the functioning of the state. Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, every day you pick up a newspaper and say the governor says such a thing about the chief minister.
That's correct.
No.
That's very
The
sad.
constitutional mythology, governor is the constitutional head of the state.
Yes.
He addresses the assembly when he says, my government.
Yes, exactly. Right. And here in Tamil Nadu, if you remember, he walked out.
Yeah.
No, the walking out was the kind of pinnacle of the dysfunction, right?
So the constitutional integrity of the governor, you see, these convictions, his beliefs, they are very important.
What happened in Tamil Nadu in that particular episode?
No, you see, the fact is that the process of preparing the governor's address, I don't know how it is in different states, but
No,
I
the
can
government
speak in
prepares the address and gives it.
but I'm saying it's an iterative process. But at least in the last few years, we have had such kind of opinionated governors. Normally, you give an address and they read it. But each successive governor wanted more and more input and, exclude this word and, put in this thing and, this and that. And so, in fact, the process is quite, it's like a give and take. We're not doing one iteration, we're not sending one thing. So by the time we go through this process, and I don't think that was intended in the Constitution, incidentally. I'm saying we have been reduced to that. So when that happens, after all of it is done is when they sign the file and when they accept the print and we send it to them. And having done that, to then show up and say that in good conscience, in my understanding, and the words he used were what really troubled us. He said, in my understanding, I'd be going against my constitutional duty were I to read these things. And so, I gave a press statement after that, or somebody asked me.
He should have been dismissed on that statement.
Yeah, I said, listen, his constitutional duty is to read what is in the book. He may have a moral problem with reading it because it goes against his personal morality, in which case you should resign and leave.
Yeah.
You should stand up for his principles. But constitutionally, there's no discretion for him in a document that has already gone through 2-3 iterations and come back. I mean, even that was my chief minister being very, very, conducive. So at some point when he said, it goes, then there was no debate after that. So I think the office has been reduced to some kind of in fact, I'll take a slightly different perspective. The perks and the kind of benefits that this office is getting now is unprecedented, right? I was finance minister and I started
We'd like to know. I think you should tell the public that.
Very important.
So I don't know, somewhere they had this kind of a meeting of governors, one of these a few years ago. And sometime around 2017, 18 something, they recommended, the committee of governors recommended to the Home Ministry that each state should set up a discretionary fund for the governor to spend money as they see fit, right? With no guidelines, no nothing. Then anyway, they were not that successful, but a lot of states got pressure from the government of India saying you must do something about it. In my state, they wrote up something and said, these are some norms, these are some guidelines, and then we're going to allocate 5 crore rupees a year. And in fact, even UP doesn't allocate that kind of money, and many southern states were being relatively well off. So then I started looking at how it was utilized. And, much like the CAG reports say that you should have all these departments that don't spend their budget during the year, and then the last day they transfer it to some other kind of PD account to make it look like the budget was spent, because we do cash accounting in the government. Governor's household was doing that. They were moving money on the last day of the account in crores of rupees away from the consolidated fund of Tamil Nadu into the governor's household account. And once it goes into the governor's household account, we have no line of sight. It's not reported to us or the CAG or anybody how those things are spent. So these offices have now become relatively, the power of pelf kind of offices. And so there's again a conflict of interest.
I did not know this, quite frankly. I did not know this. Now tell me, we were talking about discretion. Sir, you said that, governor's office really has no discretion. He has some discretion in some areas. For example, after elections are held, who to call. There is really no discretion because there are norms laid down by Sarkaria committee itself. But they don't follow those norms. But that's one area. The other area is that they have bills that come to them. Now they have the discretion to keep the bill pending for a while, but they keep it pending from 10 months to 23 months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then all that they can do under the Constitution is either to return the bill with a recommendation or send it to the President. And if the Assembly sends back the bill after they have returned it, he has to pass. But they don't do it.
No, they don't do it. In our case, they sent it back, we passed it again, and he sat on it again for a long period. And when the Supreme Court asked what's happening, he then referred it to the President, which Supreme Court said you can't do both. You can't refer it back to the Assembly and then refer it again to the President. Right. And yet, for all the verbal pronouncements from the, on the bench, the orders don't seem to come, where we say, okay, so this is not valid, the law is now in effect. So we have reached that kind of limit of where judges opine on what ought to be, but are not giving judgments on effectuating it. Right?
Hopefully that will happen. What do you say, Madanji, on the discretionary part of the governor? Because you've been on the Constitution bench.
It's like this. The expression in his discretion is there in the Constitution, Article 163. Now, some governors seem to say that, well, discretion means that I can act in my individual capacity. That's different from acting in the constitutional capacity. That's why you have situations like, the governor saying that, well, it's in my pleasure, the minister is there at my pleasure, so therefore I sack him, I withdraw my pleasure. But there he's acting in his individual capacity, not in his discretion as a constitutional authority.
So you say discretion limited to the provisions in the Constitution that gives him discretion?
Yes, yes. But then that discretion also has to be exercised in a constitutional manner.
Right.
Now, for example, and that's where constitutional morality also comes in. For example, sitting on a bill for 23 months.
Yes.
The Constitution doesn't say that you have to decide one way or the other within 15 days or 1 month or 1 year. So he says, all right, I'm sitting over it for 23 months, what can you do about it? But that's against constitutional morality. Or the Constitution doesn't say that once you refer it back to the Assembly and the Assembly passes it, then you can't send it to the President. The Constitution doesn't say that. So he says, I'm acting in my discretion. So that's where, issues of constitutional morality come in, where you cannot cross the red line and you should not. Now, what is the solution to that? There is no solution. The only solution is either, like you said, the governor should resign, or if the governor doesn't resign, then the president should withdraw the pleasure and say that, well, sorry, thank you.
So the problem is the following, that supposing somebody files a writ petition or moves the Supreme Court to the High Court, first of all, governors say, we can't be made parties.
Yes.
Protection is there.
We can't be made parties. We'll not reply. And months go into that. Now, this has to change. I mean, the governor, as a constitutional authority, should be allowed to be made a party because he must defend his action, which per se may be unconstitutional.
I want to give you an example, since you're a lawyer, that is the extreme. The Assembly passed a bill banning online gaming, or some types of it, because of the huge impact, a lot of people going into debt, committing suicides and all that. The governor receives the bill, unanimous bill, receives the bill, and decides to call, among others, gaming companies for consultations to decide whether or not he should sign the bill. I don't recall anywhere in the Constitution where he has that kind of discretion, that he is going to make an opinion. And I put that in juxtaposition on the other side. I was member of the GST Council and the group of ministers for setting policy for online gaming, casinos, and horse racing. We found so many judgments that were contradictory to each other, so we decided as a group of ministers that we were going to hire a legal counsel to help us sort through it. The Finance Ministry and the GST Directorate said, no, you don't have the right. You don't have the right to hire a counsel. You apply your mind and that's the end of you. The rest of it we'll take care of. So the GST Council, GOM, doesn't have the right to get legal counsel. The governor can call interested parties and take their opinion whether he's going to sign the bill or not. I mean, what have we reached to?
And you remember, sir, the situation where Khoshyari Sahab, who was the governor in Maharashtra, made Ajit Pawar, gave him the oath of office as chief minister early hours of the morning.
The Fadnavis, I think he swore in
the first time.
Early morning,
Yeah, 5
Early
o'clock.
morning.
5 o'clock or something.
5 o'clock in the
without
morning.
any verification of his support.
Yes.
Right. And governors are entertaining politicians and leaders of politicians from their party that is ruling the center, seeking their advice as to what should be done. And one of the problems that we are facing today is exactly this, as we are in litigation in the state of West Bengal. I mean, there are allegations of the central government that you're not allowing an agency to function. There are allegations from the other side that they are interfering in our processes. Agencies go to the state, seek the governor's assistance for the purposes of prosecuting people. Where will all this lead us? And there seems to be no solution. Now, take for example, sir, governor is the chancellor in some, in
Most states, yes, under the law.
Now what they do is they start appointing their own people.
Yeah. My understanding is slightly different. I think all those places where there used to be a British presidency seat, like Maharashtra, like Tamil Nadu, the law is that the governor is the chancellor. In Gujarat, for example, which was formed after independence, there is no role of the governor as a chancellor.
Yeah, but you have a lot of problems in West Bengal.
No, we have a problem in Tamil Nadu. What I'm trying to say is that in Gujarat, which is run by the same party as runs the government of India, there is no role for the governor in appointing vice chancellors to the university. He is not the de facto chancellor. In Tamil Nadu, he is. When we decided that this is no longer required because it's not part of the constitution, I think it's just a vestige of the old regime.
Yes, yes.
So we pass a bill, again unanimously, I think, taking him out as the chancellor. That bill has been pending with him for so long. He has not signed it.
You know, Punchi Commission gave a recommendation that this is the legacy of the British rule, we should get rid of it. And that why should the governor be a chancellor of the state of the university in a presidency? So what do? They won't move, governors will interfere, and Arif Muhammad Khan has done it in Kerala time and again. And there is no recourse to anything.
Yeah. I think at some stage, under the constitution, again, there is no process of impeachment of the governor.
Yes.
It's only the president who can withdraw the pleasure. And in the given situation, the president will not. So you're stuck.
No, not only that, there is a provision, 361 of the Constitution, which says that you cannot prosecute the governor, you cannot take any proceedings. So if you can't take proceedings while he's in office.
Or the basis on which he takes decisions.
Exactly.
It is not justiciable.
Exactly. So I think 367 should be removed from the Constitution.
Yeah, but there's a different perspective, which is that if you are not authorized to do something, then you cannot have immunity. For example, it's not a part of your official duty. Supposing now we've had a case of sexual harassment. That's not a part of the official duty of the governor.
Yes.
Okay, so why can't the governor be prosecuted for that? Because that's been done in his individual capacity.
That's right, I agree with you.
So I think that is the only way out.
Well,
Otherwise,
that's where Supreme Court has to come in, no?
Right. So
I'm mentioning this is, see, how do you develop the law? How do you make your country more vibrant, and make sure that the Constitution functions? And where essentially, though it's a unitary state, the federating units are central to it.
Give you a slightly different perspective. The consequences of these interferences are felt in the lives of crores of people. It's felt in the lack of growth, in the lack of jobs, in the lack of development. Because once you reach these stalemates, then the system just freezes, right? I mean, these are not just political battles that are, for the next election. There are real consequences to daily administration of this kind of interference and obstructive kind of activities, right? And it has been escalating. If you look at least my experience in Tamil Nadu in the 8 years I've been a legislator, it started with the governor helping to broker a deal, for lack of a better word, between two factions of the then ruling party, so that they could continue to stay in power. Right? I mean, and the handshake, the infamous handshake at the governor's mansion of the two factions coming together so that they could retain office was, a low. And then it got lower and lower and lower after that. And now we have governors interfering in everyday activity in every way possible and running their own propaganda events. So we have a governor who holds a UPSC aspirants kind of intellectual, training program, right, at the state's expense, right? So at some level it's farcical, at some other level there's a deep negative impact in your ability to administer a government and actually get anything done if these bills get stuck, if there's day-to-day interference.
And some of these bills actually are allocations of money, some of these are social programs, very vital social programs.
Some of them are appointments. He refused to sign a bill to sign an appointment order for the chairman of the Tamil Nadu Public Service Commission. The entire government recruiting goes through the Public Service Commission.
So since the beginning until 2014, and you were there, your term was extended to 2013.
Yes, I was there.
Right, 2013. Did you see any of this happen during those years?
But no. There were instances, reports, complaints, or in one particular state in Central East India, of the incumbent governor taking money for the appointment of vice chancellors as chancellor.
Oh, I see.
And there were 50 universities, a very large state, and he had a very modest charge of about 50 lakhs per vice chancellor. And,
Modest in
that was in my
terms,
time,
contemporary
but
terms, it's modest.
that blew up then. He had collected about 10, 12 crores. At that stage, he was quietly transferred to somebody else. But the kind of things you were mentioning, they were never there, no.
I've only come across one instance when I was doing my research because we were preparing the documents and all that. Back in the 70s in West Bengal, there was a governor who declined to read 3 or 4 words of the governor's address that had been prepared and given to him by the government. And it was some kind of factionalism or something. There was some deep political consequence of those few words. It was a few words. And they litigated it. The government litigated that it's not within his discretion whether he reads those 4 words or not. He should read it word for word printed, and they won the case all the way to the Supreme Court. That governor doesn't even have the discretion to exclude a word or include a word. Ours routinely did it for the last 2 years. So my chief minister moved a resolution in the House that the proceedings of the assembly will only record the printed statement and not what he actually spoke.
Right.
So he has spoken into nothingness because he has added words and deleted words that were not in the. This happened before he walked out the stage last year. He added whatever he wanted and transformed whatever he wanted because he said the word Dravidian assaulted his senses. So he would use the word Dravidian.
So you said in the beginning that, look, when the session is called, when it's to be adjourned, sign a die or otherwise, that's all what the House does and the government does. But we've seen, sir, situations where they decide on the agenda of the House. And we've had that case in Arunachal. Nabam Rabia case, where the governor was deciding as to how you're going to conduct proceedings in the House, and this is what the agenda is going to be. That's
You see, this is extreme, but if the overall relationship or the balance is not ideal, but reasonably normal, a governor can wield considerable influence on the political system if he doesn't publicize his relationship, if he doesn't make public statements. Now, it's a wrong thing, but to give you a personal example, there were changes in the political scenario when I was there. One party was there, then there were, after the elections, another party came, then there was a coalition, then it failed, and governor rule and all. But if you don't make a song and dance about it, or try to tell the public or the media that you are a great gun and you are running the state, and you have quiet relation with the political leadership, my experience is they do listen. It is not that matters of legislature, assembly, agenda, whatever, or timing, they are not beyond influence if your perceived interest or objectives are not political. If they are perceived that I am acting on your behalf in Delhi, then he is not going to listen to me.
No, you're right. I mean, that's what the president does also.
Yeah.
When the president files, they look, I find that in this particular legislation, or I find that the situation is, even political situation, is getting hot, he will call the cabinet secretary, call the prime minister and say, let's have a discussion on it. And that's right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because he's the eyes and ears both of the union government as well as the state.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but I still feel, I don't know whether Lokur Sahib agrees with that in a country of our size with many problems, large population, poverty, unemployment, we do need very strong center-state relations.
Yes.
Irrespective of the political scenario. Changing in democracy, some party will win, some party will lose. But the relationship with the states must be impeccable, it must be reliable and trustworthy. And for that, I feel that whatever else is the debate about the role of the governor, he should be tested on the touchstone of how how much he's able to contribute towards promoting the understandings and not destroying the understandings.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I would look at the governor as somebody being an elder statesman kind of person. If the government is going wrong somewhere and there is information available that is going wrong, then perhaps advise the chief minister that, I think there's a problem over here. Look into it.
But that has to be done very confidentially.
Yes, absolutely.
Not publicly.
Not publicly and not in a
It appears
manner
in the
that-
newspaper tomorrow that I sent for
that's
you and
wrong.
upbraided you.
Yeah.
You will call me a dog, you see. For good reason.
Yeah. Nor tell the chief minister that, listen, I think this is wrong and this is the way it should be done.
Yeah.
I think that should not happen.
That kind of thing can't. Because these are elected people, they are chief
Yeah.
ministers, they have their own face
Yes,
with the
yes.
public, they have their own standing. You can't, degrade somebody or derogate somebody and
Yes.
win your point.
Yeah.
So I come back to the thing, Kapil Sahab, that we, whatever the other contours of the debate, we do need good governors and we need good governance and we need good understanding.
The problem, sir, is that governors today, instead of doing what you're suggesting should be done, actually destabilize the state. This is the opposite what's happening. They will call the faction which is not supporting the chief minister. They will confabulate with them, right? They will entertain, delegations. That will be published in newspapers. That creates an environment of
The oath of the governor is to preserve, protect and defend the constitution.
Exactly.
And the constitution, the preamble and the justice, political, economic, social. If he take oath and is reasonably loyal to that oath, a great deal of good work can be done for promoting the welfare of the people of the state in many diverse manners. You don't need authority, statutory or constitutional, to play a role.
No, even in appointment of vice chancellor, if you find that somebody is tainted, I think governor can play an important role.
Well, the governor actually has a lot of discretion because even the appointment of the search committee has to go through the governor.
Yes.
And he has a nominee on it. So it's like there's so many places where they can add value, especially if they do it quietly, instead of grandstanding about it or using it as a political tool. Right?
But I'm sorry to say, Madan sir, if you really look at how elected governments have fallen in the last couple of years, you will find that the role of the governor has been central to it.
Yes.
He will not call the assembly at the right time.
Yeah, there's one particular role which has tarnished the image of the governors is vis-a-vis 356.
That's the other thing I was coming
It happened after emergency Janta government.
Yes.
Carte blanche is finished across
And then
the board.
Supreme Court struck
Then
it
it
down.
happened when Mr. VP Singh took over. Then again,
Yes.
I was in service at that time. I was working with him, and they said, "नहीं नकालो, करो." So वो फिर उनको summary orders, and then they, one sheet, two sheet of statements coming saying that on the basis of that. But then fortunately, the Supreme Court rulings on the
That
the
has
abuse of
stopped
356,
Yes.
that has stood well.
Yeah, but it doesn't stop the problem.
Doesn't stop the
But it's now done in a different manner.
in a different
They
way.
have had a role in toppling governments. They have had a role in creating governments out of bits and pieces that they choose to put
And
together.
what they do is they give enough time for defections to take
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
You see? And if you give enough time, and then if it comes to the opposition form in the government, they will say, prove your majority tomorrow.
This afternoon,
Yeah.
So they are so blatantly partisan. And the question then arises, do we need governors?
Well, our
And-
party
or is there
stand,
another way of actually dealing with center-state relations?
I'm sure there are many good ways, and it's a clear vacuum in our system that we don't have better channels and better methods for center-state relations, which are absolutely vital. Our party stand has always been from 1967 that these are vestiges of an old regime, especially during the days of diarchy, where the governors were there to effectively neutralize the legislative power of the Indian elected councils. So, from the days of our founder, Narinder Nath, it's always been, we don't need them, they're a vestige, they should be removed. I can see some merit in the argument of center-state relations, but I think there's so many ways that could be done. And particularly because we have seen the worst outcomes or the worst excesses of what I assume was never imagined in the Constitution when the roles were written, then we have to say, is there any kind of turning the clock back? You know, this happens to be a particularly aggressive regime, but let's assume regime change happens, sooner or later it will. Will it go back to being the kind of governor that Vohra was, or will we continue to see more of this? So there's a reasonable argument to be made that this post has become politicized to an event or to an extent that it's not recoverable.
The problem is that if you put an individual there and he says 9 of the governors appointed today say they belong to the RSS or the BJP. So if you have an individual who belongs to the RSS and his agenda is to destabilize the government, he can easily do it. But if you have an institutional mechanism, right, which coordinates between the center and the state, like a kind of council which has nominees both of the union government as well as the state, which discusses issues of the relationship of that state, and you should have nominees in every state you should have such a council, then that council can deal with issues that the governor individually deals with, because the governor can be easily influenced if he belongs to a political party. So why can't we have a mechanism which is institutional rather than individual?
Well, you've seen for yourself, institutions can also be eroded.
Yes, that's the point.
And the role of the governor is eroded. It's a constitutional appointment.
Absolutely.
He carries appointments for the president, signed by the president. And yet, where does it end up?
No, but if you have nominees of the state
Now, if
government...
you have a mechanism for, this is a relationship between the union and the states and give and take, and you say institutionalize it. What kind of mechanism can we have?
2 nominees of the state or 3 nominees of the state, 3 nominees of the union sitting in council and discussing issues, and a bill can go to them and then that can be discussed. There it's difficult to dominate. It's difficult to...
yeah, but then you might end up having a stalemate.
No, but then you can have a constitutional provision saying that, no, if the state says that this has to be done, it will be done. Yeah. It can be challenged in court. I'm just saying that at least a debate should start on that.
I'm not against a debate. We need to discuss it, how to...
Exactly.
The mechanics are...
Because the individual representation is actually destroying the federal structure, according to me.
If you don't mind, I'll give my experience in the GST Council, which is allegedly the place now where all the states and the union are sitting together, allegedly the place where federalism is on display.
There's a lot of politics in that.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of vested interests in terms of money, but the GST Council, the good and the bad of it is the design of it is so skewed that it is dysfunctional, and I've said it on record and written into the council. So the way it's set up right now is not the right way for that purpose. In the sense that it creates a place for everybody to speak, it has become so unique that very often issues that should not be in the GST Council at all get brought up in the GST Council because there's no other forum. So there is a clear need for a forum. Yes. This particular design of the GST Council or even of the GST, voting and mandate and all that has serious problems with it. This is not the place for that. But the notion of having a body where there are representatives from the states and from the union is absolutely vital today. And this one becomes the default place to discuss things that have nothing to do with GST. No other place for all of us to talk to each other.
Mm. So therefore, instead, because the governor will only carry the agenda of the union forward. So there's no place then for the state's opinion. So there needs to be a mechanism, I think, at least. Yeah. What do you say, Vohra?
Where is the motivation? Who will carry through such ideas? For what purpose?
So that's why we're having this debate.
You see, if the current arrangements are working well for the ruling parties in the states and the center, there is no issue. Now, the issue is only in the intellectual debates.
Sir, no, sir. This government is not going to last forever. Let's be...
No, both ways, I'd say. A, no government lasts forever.
No
and
government
B,
lasts.
many states are really fed up with the way this is. How many litigation, how many cases have started?
No, now I am filing on behalf of several states. We are filing suits against the Union of India, which never used to happen. It's very seldom used to happen.
Yeah, but these cases won't be listed for 3, 4, 5 years, and the decision will come 6, 7, 8 years. So that's another aspect of our federal democracy, the role of judiciary, legislature, executive.
There is an element of dismay there, so I have to say.
Yeah, I think when things go wrong, the earlier perception was years ago, decades ago, at least when I was young, that the immediate response to the judiciary sets things right. There is a diktat, there is a mandamus and correction. Now there is a gap of 5 years between the offense or the allegation or complaint and its remedy. Then things take their own turn.
What do you say? You've been there, part of that institution for a long, long time.
Yeah, you see, I think delays in decision making by the Supreme Court or by the High Courts is unacceptable. Recently I wrote about 2 persons who have been arrested for the Delhi riots in 2020. They've spent 4 years in jail. Their case was listed in the Delhi High Court 59 times for bail. Now, it's totally unacceptable, So when you're dealing with a bail matter and you're adjourning it 59 times, sir, if a constitutional question arises, how many adjournments are there going to be?
So luckily, there's no role of the governor there. But let me just perhaps end this conversation by what's happened in Delhi. I mean, Delhi has become a dysfunctional state because of the problem that the lieutenant governor has created, who is following the diktats of the Home Ministry. And so no work is going on, no development is going on. Everything is decided on the basis of how to get rid of Kejriwal, basically, right? And Kejriwal, on the other hand, is imputing motives to every decision of the government of India. Where is this going to? Ultimately, the people of Delhi suffer. If your drains are not cleaned, if the sanitation is work not done, and the rains come, Delhi is flooded. It's because there was no work done. Now, you say you will not do the work because the blame will go to the state. Now, if this is the motivation of decision making at a constitutional level, where do we go?
Yeah, but this matter also is pending before the apex court.
Yes. But not being decided.
Not been decided.
That's
pending
the problem.
for considerable period.
Yeah.
You see, there again, if I remember correctly, the last amendments to the NCRT Act,
Yes.
a clear division of responsibilities, executive authority and legislative authority between the elected element, the legislature and the lieutenant governor, who takes direction directly from Home Ministry, the police, lands, and so law and order, so on and so forth. Beyond that, if you don't interfere in the domain given to the political setup, things should work. But apparently what you are saying is, and what seems to be the situation, that those arenas which are allocated to the elected elements to perform, those are being infringed with.
Yes.
Yes.
And so no work is done.
So this is a diarchy, you see, this is a kind of, and this will be at the cost of the people and the cost of the nation.
Ultimately, the people suffer.
No, every state, it's at the cost of the people. This just happens to be an extreme example because there's still some legal kind of issue about the separation. But every state where they interfere, that was my earlier point, the interference is not just a political interference, it has significant consequences and costs to development, to people's lives, to progress.
So we can sort of sum up by saying the governors today don't follow principles of constitutional morality. Their discretionary power, their interpretation of their discretionary power is beyond the provisions of the Constitution. The governors are carrying on the agendas of the union government. It's the people in every state who suffer. And the respect that governors should have as an institutional authority to an elected government, right, is not being honored by the diktats of people sitting in New Delhi. And this is impacting the federal structure of this country. And so there should be a rethink as to whether at all we should have a governor who has these kind of powers, which ultimately are not in the larger interest of the country. Is that a fair sum up of what we've discussed?
Yeah, except that we should not have a governor with this kind of power.
But I mean, sometimes I wonder if it's diktat or it's just a race to the bottom that everybody wants to prove they're more loyal than the king. Right? Because these are all political appointments of people who have been, I'm sure some of it is diktat. I'm just not sure that 100% of every one of these can be diktat. And it's more likely that because these are highly, kind of cushy jobs that have lots of perks and lots of benefits, and there's a lot of political appointments happening, that there's a kind of protect my standing kind of behavior, possibly, as a former student of psychology.
No, maybe you're right. Let's put it this way then, that wherever the diktat is needed, there is a diktat.
Exactly.
And wherever the governor wants to show his loyalty,
To read the mind of the
they read
king.
the mind. So therefore, there are both elements involved. I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.